now I'm happy to present our next presenter, Dr. Elliot Pines. He's a polymath with a remarkable academic and professional background. Dr. Pines holds a BA in physics as well as MS and Ph.D. degrees in electrical engineering. Throughout his illustrious career, he has served as a senior scientist and engineer across various industries, including semiconductor, communications, aerospace, and BioInspired technology. He has made significant contributions to technological advancements and innovation. In addition to his industry experience, Dr. Pines has dedicated much of his time to education, serving as a teacher in STEAM fields. Though retired from formal teaching, his passion for inspiring the next generation continues to make an impact, and we will feel this today, I'm sure. So Dr. Pines will now present his work titled Come Watson, The Game's Afoot, Hunting for a Networked Evolutionary Game Theory for an Integrating World. So his presentation will explore how globalization unfolds as a great evolutionary network game, emphasizing the need for a win-win outcome. Dr. Pines will discuss the application of classic game theory concepts like Pareto optimization and the Nash equilibrium to evolutionary theory and network feedback from the environment. So please, we will see now and be very inspired, I think, of this presentation. Please.
Welcome to Come Watson, The Game's Afoot, Hunting for a Networked Evolutionary Game Theory for an Integrating World. Globalization advances in a great networked evolutionary game despite temporary setbacks induced by the global socio-political phenomenon of peaking. Winning requires an all-encompassing win-win outcome. But how? Let's begin with the work of two biologists, one from the 20th century and one from the 21st. General systems theory, GST, studies universal principles that can be applied to all types of systems. Ludwig von Bertalanffy established GST in 1950, followed by key developments like Monterana's autopoiesis concept for living systems and cybernetics by Ashby and Weiner. In the 1970s, Thom and Zeeman developed catastrophe theory to explain sudden behavioral changes in systems. The 1980s saw the emergence of chaos theory through researchers like Lorenz and Ruel examining nonlinear dynamic systems. Complex adaptive systems, CAS theory, developed at the Santa Fe Institute, later introduced concepts of emergence and self-organization. While GST originated in biology, it has influenced many fields and led to various system sciences, representing a shift from partial solutions to comprehensive approaches in problem solving. To explore, classical science seeks across the network space and at different levels of generality or specification to define a floor of elements and a ceiling of complexity. Within this finite compartmentalization, the elements are described in terms of their arrangement and distribution and their connection. Von Bertalanffy saw the generic system aspects of this, and others saw related generalizations, leading to a more universal system view of all science and the deep reality of nature behind this human perception and modeling. So, when theory meets experiment and they disagree sufficiently, then either one is wrong, or less likely, they both are. For a professional scientist worthy of the name, it may be assumed that the mathematics and/or worded reasoning of the theory have been thoroughly checked, as well as the calibration of equipment and the measurement errors connected with the experiment. Without error in inductive logic or causality, what is left is simply that increased accuracy or a sufficient variation of conditions have made the isolation of what is observed no longer possible. The paradigm must shift to accept effects of connection with the environmental supersystem or the internal reality of subsystems. Dennis Noble, an Oxford physiologist, proposes that organisms evolve purposely, challenging traditional natural selection theory. His 2023 MIT Press book, Evolution on Purpose, suggests evolution is an intentional, organism-driven process. This view could be enriched by combining Nobel's classical biophysics with quantum theories of evolutionary consciousness from Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, while considering Donald Hoffman's premise that consciousness underlies both matter and space-time rather than emerging from them. Taken together, we are led to the understanding that the scientific study of the world at all levels is best seen from the standpoint of systems, all is network. Specifically, all is a vast integral system. The evolution of this is purposeful, towards an ultimate unified development that is purposeful. The tendency is in the world of life to go from organisms to systems of organisms to superorganisms. Human globalization and its interface with nature is an intrinsic part of that reality. In short, it's a networked evolutionary game. A what? Glad you asked. Come, Watson, the game's afoot. Britannica defines game theory as a branch of applied mathematics that provides tools for analyzing situations in which parties, called players, make decisions that are interdependent. This interdependence causes each player to consider the other player's possible decisions or strategies in formulating strategy. A solution to a game describes the optimal decisions of the players who may have similar, opposed, or mixed interests, and the outcomes that may result from these decisions. Admittedly, a simplistic generalization, but for this stage of the research, there is a universal assumption of a single inferior Nash equilibrium target and superior Pareto optimum target in every game. Not always, but generally. A Nash equilibrium is a target in competitive games and will generally, certainly long-term, result in a poorer outcome forced by mutual distrust. A Pareto optimum is the target in collaborative games while mutual trust holds. Competitive and collaborative games themselves bifurcate into better and worse versions.
Money, must be funny in the rich man's world. You ain't seen the best of me yet. Give me time, I'll make you forget the rest. I'm smarter than you. Poopy, poopy, doo, doo. You're dumber than me. Tinkle, tinkle, wee, wee.
There is a boorish level in human ego, like the Freudian id, animal-like emotionality magnified by human intelligence and its unique relative nature regarding the desire for wealth, power, prestige, fame, and knowledge, wisdom, ideology. One can actually consider an objective loss a win where a competitor loses even more.
Money.
The Nash equilibrium here requires McGinnis to buy the most expensive car he can. His win or loss on this is entirely dependent on Jones's choice, a sad irrational reality that isn't accounted for in the rational model of classic game theory. The chart is produced by Game Theory Explorer GTE version 2.3, which can also calculate Nash equilibria and other useful results. While still mature, the classic game theory competitor operates with a completely rational ego. It is short-sighted and selfish, but at least objectively so, with a live and let live attitude. This, save in a net-sum zero game, where a win is only possible through a competitor's loss, and worse in extremes, such as the prisoner's dilemma. In the prisoner's dilemma, Type 1 and Type 2 competitors will act the same, forced into the same Nash equilibrium due to distrust. There is only enough evidence to convict a pair of criminal suspects for a short sentence, but each is told separately that if they confess, Their partner will get a much longer sentence, but charges against them will be dropped. However, if both confess, they will both get longer sentences than they would have originally, but not as long as if their partner alone had confessed. The unfortunate logic for the prisoners, of course, is that both will confess. Due to competitive distrust, they will end up with the somewhat longer sentences.
Back in 1833, William Foster Lloyd noticed something fascinating about the so-called common pastures. In other words, pastures without an owner, which can be used by everyone. He noticed that these common pastures were in considerably worse shape than those which had an owner. Why? Simply because the short-term self-interest of the people who were using those pastures made them consume too many resources, and in the long run, everyone suffered. George asked himself, should I buy another animal? And decided that yes, he'd make more money that way. He knew he was overloading the pasture, but didn't care. He wanted the extra money. The problem is that everyone did the same thing. In the end, the pasture was brutally overloaded, and therefore became unusable. Some people made short-term profits, but in the long run, everyone lost. As far as the pastures which had an owner were concerned, this didn't happen, because it was in the best interest of the owners to exploit their property sustainably. Today, similar situations occur frequently. For example, with fishing grounds such as the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, which used to be home to a huge cod population. About 50 years ago, however, technology enabled people to catch a lot more fish than before. The fish population, and thereby the fishing industry, collapsed by the 90s and might never recover. The same way, humans are doing everything from polluting their Earth's oceans and atmosphere to generating traffic jams during rush hour. There we have it. The tragedy of the commons.
With a standard collaborative relationship, there is already a maturity of long-term planning and the building of some level of trust with a common win-win goal strategy. In this, there is already an egoistic team spirit that somewhat begins to reflect the Freudian superego concept. One is not so concerned about short-term personal loss as long as the team is stable and doing well, as personal losses are expected to be made up for in the long run by net gain. One is satisfied to bestow to the team for the sake of ultimately better reception than as a competitor. Mutual trust is everything, at least certainly at the start, but it is still a shaky business in a purely self-interested collaboration. A perception of where the grass might be greener, especially with a fear that the collaboration could be hitting a period of net sum zero that others could take advantage of, could lead to a preemptive betrayal. Yet, if held together, trusting in the win-win till beyond, a sense of camaraderie and unity can be established, a bond that seems to form in egoless nature so easily. It takes a superman or superwoman to rise up over the ego. So let's see what we can learn from some super arch villains like Lex Luthor and Brainiac. The greatest light can only be appreciated in the midst of the greatest darkness, after all.
Organic beings cannot be trusted. I can't argue with that. But if you and I are one, truly one, trust won't be an issue, will it? Agreed.
Human egoism underlies our environmental and social challenges, causing both socialist and free enterprise systems, or any mix, to fall short of their potential. As globalization advances, our intelligence can either lead to a superego-like path of constructive integration or down a disintegration dead end. The solution lies in comprehensive education about both the goals and methods of overcoming egoism, with Ehud offering one multifaceted approach, as will be discussed later. Yes, it certainly sounds like pie way up high in the sky. Freud, who I keep referring to, had pretty strong evidence against this ever being real already a century back. Seems like lots of evidence supports that even today. However, that centuries since, especially recent decades, have demonstrated a wondrous unity and self-organizing purpose in nature. The power is there, the force is there, and it's pressing. We need only use our intelligence to jump the ego wall. Overcoats are not necessary if we are all sitting together in a warm room. Indeed, if we are one, truly one, or even just close enough to fall into that psychological domain, trust won't be an issue. There is a new reality to be found just outside of human, individual, and social perception that must be taken in. AI can enhance human intelligence when properly controlled through collective decision-making. This combination, integrating across the Bloom taxonomy, the hierarchy of thinking, can lead to breakthrough problem-solving beyond current limitations. While machine learning can even directly help overcome human biases, identifying true expertise requires extensive data and time. By reducing ego-driven barriers and fostering unity, we can better identify and isolate expert wisdom regarding different issues, and directly apply more direct processes like the Delphi method to improve collective decision-making. The four player types also represent, in a deep sense, the purposeful evolution discussed earlier. All this in this human scenario towards a superorganism. From classic game theory, so prominent by early in the 20th century Cold War between the United States and Soviet Union, there developed a modified dynamic form of survival of the fittest in the arena of evolutionary theory by the mid-1960s. With 21st century computing power, there came network game theory. It enables us to study complex interactions between entities and their environments, opening new research frontiers with the advent of networked evolutionary game theory. Modern simulation capabilities allow us to revisit von Bertalanffy's general systems theory and Nobel's purposeful evolution. Hoffman and his graduate students use such tools to demonstrate how evolution requires immediate simplified sensory interpretation and mental models of the environment. Nobel and his collaborators also found that environmental influences can directly affect life's instructions. Both of these represent devastating challenges to neo-Darwinian assumptions. This understanding is crucial for studying globalization as an evolutionary process, starting with a network game theory analysis of the relationship of our four player types. The present research uses NetLogo, now with 3D capabilities, that in our case just improves visibility. Our players are acting in a conceptual, not even real virtual space. It's a research and educational simulation platform originating in the Logo programming language that has itself been continuously evolving for half a century now. The present research explores how different player types interact in Prisoner's Dilemma and Tragedy of the Commons scenarios, examining survival-thrival patterns and influence while considering and seeking to overcome the simulator's technical limitations in modeling complex global systems. We need some rules for our simulated world. Not the most exciting part of this presentation, I'm afraid, but as I say, rules are rules. Seriously, we need some flavor of this to get the gist of the present work in progress. So rule 1. Our starting point. How many of each kind of player do we start with? 2. How do the interactions in games happen? How do these lead to collaborative groups, memberships, and rejections? 3. Once inside a collaboration, what kind of collaborators will last a while and permanently if the collaborative group itself survives long enough to develop its thriving? Also, what is the relationship of collaborative 1 and 2 players and their contributions until a collaborative 1 player would betray the collaboration? 4. In our modified Prisoner's Dilemma, cooperation creates net gains. We have 4 player types, each valuing others' outcomes differently. Competitive 1 players are most aggressive. They actually gain from others' losses, treating others' losses as half gains and gains as half losses. Competitive 2 players follow standard prisoner's dilemma rules. Collaborative 1 players care about others for still egoistic reasons. They treat others' losses as their own losses at half value and gains similarly, but they can still betray and act like competitive 2 players. Finally, collaborative 2 players are truly altruistic. They fully share both others' gains and losses and never betray. Yellow highlights expected game outcomes. Green shows collaborative 1 player betrayals, and brown indicates mutual betrayal between collaborative 1 players. The matrix is symmetric, mirror reflected about the diagonal, so there are actually only 10 different games, not 16. 5. Collaboration has 2 additional payoffs. One is connected with collective intelligence, and particularly the improvement in this by the collaborative 2 subpopulation. The other is connected with diminished cost of internal protective barriers, legal, policing, etc., due to the subpopulation. 6. Any game win made above the Pareto optimum, and thus the other player was taken advantage of, is taken as an act related to the tragedy of the commons, and some multiple of that is taken as a tax divided evenly across all players. Finally, 7. Life and death. At the end of the set number of ticks, that is, time steps, the lowest performers, individuals and/or collaborative teams, are deleted and replaced by duplicates of the highest performing ones. Of course, there are many details and edge conditions to account for that cannot be discussed in a short presentation, and I think that we are all sufficiently bored enough at this point. So let's move on to the state of the simulation itself. Well, not really. This video from early February, actually, shows my initial development work with NetLogo 3D and ChatGPT 4.0 helping me with writing program and debugging. We're still doing that. It was filmed on my phone to allow freeze framing and space navigation, as the built-in NetLogo 3D recording had some limitations. Please excuse the video quality. It's meant to give you a feel for the virtual workspace, basically. Those white lines radiating from our yellow player, who clearly has delusions of grandeur, are experimental visible links intended for future meritocracy-based collaborator to human hubs, that is, hyper-connected players, in scale-free networks. The space has wraparound topology, so links exiting one boundary face re-enter through the opposite face, creating those apparent multiple starbursts that you saw. The one meaningful connection here is the thick yellow line between 2 magenta collaborator 1 figures. This link is temporary, as type 1 collaborators eventually betray their teams and lose membership. Player interactions occur when players meet on the same patch, that is location, during simulation runs. Players move 1 patch at a time in random order in any of the 6 directions, triggering game membership interactions when 2 players enter the same patch. Another future advancement planned is to incorporate Ehud's integral education program as patch-through teams at distributed locations. This real-world program aims to evolve players towards collaborator 2 mindsets through culturally adapted activities that build empathy and cooperation. The program combines physical and collaborative mental warm-up exercises and structured round-table workshops with rules specifically designed to enhance integral thought processes and collaborative warmth, respect, and unity. Other components, of collaborative project-based learning, themed storytelling, and role reversal theater to develop emotional uniformity and social cohesion. Through these, the quick fostering of trust and shared responsibility in teams is absorbed by students who will become truly open-minded and open-hearted, but not naive, collaboration-oriented individuals who can integrate effectively into a unified global system. Our goal is evolving humanity into a superorganism where ego and intelligence serve rather than hinder, achieved through integral education and networked purposeful evolution. This transformation of collective intelligence can create a unified whole far greater than its parts. Future modeling will explore dimensions, the effects of integral education, but also how a unified ideas can influence an undecided majority through such known phenomena as snowball effects and social cryptomnesia. Further, it's planned to introduce meritocracy-based human hubs, again, hyperconnected players as the Yellow Man experiment, in global scale free human networks as an organization of the simulation space. Game theory and microeconomics research suggests that altruism grows with wealth, such that in the limit of infinite wealth, there will be perfect universal altruism. This connects to Frank Tipler's The Physics of Immortality and his omega point theory of humanity's unlimited unity with nature in the vastly far future. Tipler's work has sparked 30 years of exploration into higher consciousness and simulation theory. Interestingly, his key hypothesis test measured confirmation of the existence of the Higgs boson particle, which was successfully accomplished in 2012. Questions, please.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Pines, for this excellent presentation here, taking us into the depth of game theory and of the highest possibility. And we are happy to see if we have questions here in our room or from YouTube. And I already see that there are, but I want to see if we also have in our space some participant wanting to ask. Until we find this out, I want to ask you a question, Dr. Pines. Oh, let's take first, of course, our host here, please. What is your question?
Thank you very much, dear Dr. Pines. It was really a very interesting and inspiring talk. I would like to ask you what, from your point of view, is the most efficient collective game, or probably set of games, which could provide the most quick and direct proceeding to the stage of superorganism for humanity, please.
Well, the whole idea is that we're the aim is really to reach this unified level, this collaborative 2 level of unity. It automatically jumps trust because it's intrinsic, as our 2 supervillains pointed out. If you run truly one, you trust yourself, don't you? In other words, there's no issue with trust at all. And it's a level that we have to get to. The point is that in the game is set up, and it's a long debug situation, and there's various improvements I've already made at this point, but the going is slow. One looks to develop, in other words, they're looking at the dynamics of the entire thing. There's certain advantages that are given to the natural advantages begin to come out. It is a demonstration of, over time, realization of the advantages and the superiority of this unified set. The collaborative one, really just every man for himself, begins to fall apart. I mean, the competitive groups, the collaborative, the first type, the egoistic type, tends to fall apart because there's the greener pastures, and there's always the thing of betrayals when things go slow, bad times, give up too soon. To really hold out develops this sort of camaraderie, and there's a certain sense of, once you trust, the costs within. We have, for example, it's huge. I mean, when we do police, armies, lawyers, the various things, commercialization, things breaking down, that sort of stuff, begin to eliminate. There's no need to do that. You don't do it with a family. You begin to economize in tremendous ways. In addition to going on, also, it brings up the opportunity that everybody, it forms a, so to speak, there was work done in it's interesting in the last few years on what is the nature of like wisdom of the crowd. We've heard a lot about this. In fact, what it is everybody's good at something. There are different questions that come up. In that, there's a certain number of experts. It would normally take time because of people's ego to form a statistically large group, such that the people who really have some instinct or knowledge, they may not even realize it themselves, in a certain area, a keen eye, a keen knowledge, scientific background, economic, people skills, whatever it is, tend to gather together. They form an agreement. They agree because they know what they're talking about. Everybody else is going to random, yes, no, etc., etc. That begins to cancel that differential mode begins to cancel out, and the common mode comes in. Then we know who the experts are. This will happen faster without ego, and it's in all different directions. The point is that as soon as you get this, you begin to set up. I spoke about the hubs, the Yellow Man experiment. In each particular area, flexibly, you begin to form a hierarchy. So we have a group. Everybody's equal. But we might call what I call factory. Okay, in a specific area, specific lane, automatically, and this happens in nature, automatically experts in that area are quickly chosen. They form a meritocracy hierarchy, and they lead with their special ideas, which goes to the whole. We see this, for example, in the human brain. In fact, there's cells that this is not brought up here. I brought it up in a former lecture. There was, in fact, our host country, Switzerland, there was research going on there for a few years. And what they discovered was that there's these structures, whenever you have a problem to solve, specific structures that are ideal for this form automatically, multidimensional, because the link topologically is multidimensional. Of course, it's really 3D, but it's the equivalent. The connections are equivalent as if it were what's called a simplex structure of this higher dimension, up to 11 dimensions, like this, very complex, quickly form, which are optimal for solving this type of problem. It just knows. This is whether you say it's a consciousness or some chaotic feedback, but it just knows. It's just empirical fact. Solving the problem, giving the answer to the brain as a whole, and then it goes back into the general mass of neurons. It's an amazing thing. But this is all of nature. Nature does this all the time. We can too. The only thing holding us back is ego. So again, the ideal, the optimal, what we're trying to study is what we see that gets us quickly into the game. What I want to do is some of the Ehud concepts we can therefore exercise in this too, hopefully. As I said, basic concepts of integral education to bring in to speed up this process of this realization, basically teaching the brain doesn't control the ego controls the brain. However, it's intelligent. We're intelligence. We have that advantage and disadvantage. We can talk to that. Informing the intelligence as an advisor to the ego, it can inform the ego that, hey, your best bet is to do this, which will take it in a development path towards where we want to go for that superorganism, as all nature does.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So yes, you talk about superorganism. You talk about that the world is a vast integrated system. This is how you started. So how to find your place in that system?
Excellent question. There's two points really, and actually I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a very at the beginning I mentioned something about peaking. I didn't define that, and that's very important, because I'll even go out on a limb, and I will say that this is the fundamental issue that Ehud was created for, in a sense. What happens is you have globalization. People, it's evolutionary nature. It's what all nature does. Now, the problem with peaking is that when it reaches a certain point, this was a term developed in the 1960s, 70s. I think it was a Wall Street Journal article or some research by an economist. And it's the idea from economic reasons. Let's say you see when Britain left the common market, in other words, suddenly there reaches a point, this betrayal point, that, hey, we're not making money. We're not gaining by this globalization. Momentarily, at least, we're losing. Things are going down. So it can be economic, it can be cultural. In other words, the movement. There's a cultural threat. It's a large wave of immigrants come in. The culture changes. Feels they're drowning. There's certain threats. Sometimes terror, et cetera, crime, criminal, and some is just hyped. But there's this reaction. Suddenly it came in too fast. We weren't prepared, and there's this anti-immigration movement, throw everybody out. Now, the point is that that was considered on a national level. And Ehud studied this thing. It's actually everything's fractal. Everything is it causes some components of components of components. Okay, it goes down to the interaction between states or provinces, individual localities, cities, communities, within communities, friends, circles of friends, co-workers, families, the individual, and even within the individual, I'm not a psychologist, but I would say in terms of multiple personalities, mood, arguments going internally. Now, the point is, ideally, you would integrate it smoothly. And what I'll say is waves breaking, the tide is coming in. If you have waves on top of that, okay, it's a little bit rough on the surface. You can have major chaotic thrusts and a tsunami coming in. It's very, very dangerous. And the thing is, globalization is coming at us fast and heavy in a very dangerous way, because the idea is that we want it smoothly. I'll give it, if I can give an analogy, in my background in electrical engineering, okay, there's a phenomenon called ringing. In other words, ideally, if I have a circuit, I want to get my information as quickly as I can. So I have a transistor going to the next level. It interacts. Ideally, there's a smooth transition, upward and downward when this data hits and translates to the next transistor down the line. If you go too slowly, you don't want to go too slowly, so you try to push it as fast as you can. If you push it too fast, instead of this nice smooth transition, you get feedback, and you get ringing, and it goes okay. And it takes a lot longer, and it's a lot noisier on the way, and it finally will settle out. That globalization is going to happen. The problem is, ringing is nice and a thing, but when you've got conscious human beings, organisms that feel, we're not just cause and effect. There's something inside, a spiritual nature, a consciousness, whatever you wish to call it. Everybody knows this phenomenon. You may all be artificial intelligence. I'm not, and you can each say the thing about it, but we're feeling the same thing. It's painful. Okay, this is terrible, terrible pain, and that peaking is when you're basically ringing. Okay, we've got to work. This is entire purpose to smoothly bring in the superorganism, as in nature, at each level, how to coordinate, how much, etc. It's not that evil as far as separating out either. There's two things that are going on. One is the individual, one is the whole. We must have this differentiation, okay? And in a structure that it's like a hatred, but it turns into a respect. In addition to, so on a higher level, homogeneity, but we don't want to just wipe out everything. On a lower level, there has to be differentiation, all right? It is necessary that your heart does not have brain cells and thing. On the other hand, the purpose of its differentiation, I have to be me, not you, is ultimately the purpose, and this is the collaborative too, to serve you. In other words, in order for me to be served, to serve the whole system, to help the brain, to help this, to help these other cells, I need to be me in order to accomplish this. I'll give one last analogy because I know it's taking too long. An airline flight, your selfish thing is the oxygen goes out, right? Everybody grabs the oxygen, and there's emergency mask comes down. Everybody puts it on their face. Now, an interesting phenomenon that seems similar and crazy is that when there's a mother with a little child, and it comes down, and she puts it on her face first. She says, what are you going on? Because that's what she's instructed by the airline. Why is it? Because what do you want to do? Your main thing is, I care more about the child's life than me. She's more important than I am. Okay, he's more important than I am. That's fine. You really mean that? Then think. If the child goes unconscious for a moment, it'll take 60 seconds or a minute before there be any brain damage. It'll take a couple of minutes before death. If you go unconscious, you're both going to die. The best way to protect that child from brain damage and save its life is I know what you want to do, put on your mask first. So in the same way, as collaborative 2 begins to develop, there's still that, it seems selfish, pushing away. I'm sorry, I can't have too much immigration, I can't have too much. I need economic survival because I have to live in order to serve the system.
Right.
So
this is what I'm getting, Dr. Pines. Thank you so much. I'm getting that we need to make smart decisions.
Yes, exactly.
To enable us to become to this higher consciousness. So thank you, Dr. Pines. Very inspiring. And if there are more questions, please raise them here in our common mail, conference.iud@gmail.com. So thank you so much again, Dr. Pines. And